had a district book study over the last couple months, and it pulled from leadership across this district, from departments, from schools, and just people that are instrumental in making a difference in their roles in the district. So we are here right now to talk about a book. It's on blended learning. And it's a little different than what Heather Worrell and her team are studying, but it does support and complement that work. And our hopes today were to hopefully, one, inform people about some different things to consider as we're transitioning from virtual settings back to in-person. And we know that things will be different, as we'll probably be more receptive to blended learning models because it is working for just new instructional approaches. This particular segment is focused on chapters, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8. And we have Michelle Shorey here from, she's with the ELL department. And then we also have Nicole, and I am blanking on Nicole's last name, but she is, I believe, an assistant principal in our district.
Travis.
And so you can kind of get a feel for the leadership mixture that we've had with the first two groups. Sorry, Nicole, Travis, I've totally blanked. It's the pressure of being online, I think. But I just, I want to encourage people to don't sit back and wait for learning to come to you. Jump into the deep end and make sure you have people with life preservers around you to help you with that discovery process of just new learning. And with the water theme in mind right now, just remember that jumping in has a ripple effect. And it's important that you not be afraid to try new things. And I absolutely am humbled to work with this group, because every time I come to the discussion with what I brought to it, somebody uncovers something else much deeper. And I look forward to growing with them on this today and then future book studies. So I'll turn it over to you two, ladies.
Dr. Isaacs, we were honored to participate with you, and thank you for being, you lead professional learning for the district, and you yourself love to learn, and that is obvious. So that is really exciting I've worked in 5 districts, and let me tell you, not in every district is it that way. So we appreciate you more than I can say. All right. So Nicole, did you ever know that you were going to be a YouTube star when you were training to be a teacher?
I did not. In fact, I really, really hope to not be a YouTube star, but so far it's happened a couple of times. So I'm just going to have to get over it. So I'm appreciative of this opportunity. Yeah. So this should be interesting. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen as well now?
Sure.
Okay. I sure will.
Jim, did you know that you were going to be a VJ? Did you know that?
I absolutely had no idea. Walking into this role, I still didn't really get a grasp on that, but I've learned very quickly. Getting that DJ mode. Luckily, I have the voice for it, so we're good.
You do. Well,
Jim, you won the award for the coolest background. I don't know if that's real or not, but I could take a few lessons from that. That's pretty neat back there.
That is all Mrs. Unger, the wonderful librarian, who will actually be on next. So yeah, that's not me, but it does. She makes me look good.
Give her a raise. It's nice.
It looks awesome. I had a tree behind me, but I took it down because I didn't know if it was a winter thing or a holiday thing. So you're rocking it. You're owning it. I like it.
Well, thank you.
All right. So so Nicole and I were so lucky that we got to meet each other actually in this book study. And it was a blast because we got to hang out late during the week and drink cocoa and sometimes wear pajamas and talk about professional learning, because I'm a nerd and I love professional learning books. So it was really fun to find a group of other ladies. I think it was all ladies, right? In the district that really enjoyed doing that. So we are going to talk to you or share what we learned about device management and print versus digital reading. And then also we're going to talk about content design, which I think is so interesting because instructional design is something a lot of teachers, we haven't studied, ID, but that's a fascinating topic as we've moved into this blended space that I think we all need to learn more about. So I think that's cool. All right. So if we're going to move ahead, I don't see your screen. Do you see Nicole's screen?
Oh, you don't see my
Yeah, no, no, you're good. You're good. You're good. You're good. Nope,
Oh,
you're good,
interesting. I
Nicole.
thought,
You had it, Nicole.
you know,
You were there. Michelle, if you look at the bottom, you'll see it, but I have it highlighted for our YouTube audience.
gotcha. That is an
They
upgrade
will
since
not
last
see
time.
any. They will not see any of us other than the screen unless I actually click to you to, show your pretty face while you're talking.
All right. Well, I like it very much. So, all right. So the big thing we want to talk about, when we start is the fact that, when you're working with students, you want to make sure that they have a voice. So that is all chapter 5. And we're going to talk to students about, thinking about where we can have a classroom where they can have voice, and not everybody has to do the exact same thing all of the time. So the rest of this chapter, some of the ideas I'm going to share are really going to be helpful for when we're back in person, which I think we all need to be ready for, right? Because it could really happen quickly, or it might take a lot longer. We just don't know. All right, so we're moving on. And on slide 3, if we look at slide 3, we're going to talk about some of the things that Michelle Eaton recommends. And some of the things that she really recommends is making sure that you have, clear instructions for kids. You want to make sure that you've got a device management procedure, thinking about how kids check things out. And then also, she's really big on transitions, because when we go back into classrooms, the genie's out of the bottle. We're going to be using devices a lot more. Our kids are used to being one-to-one. And so we're going to have to think about, how do we get kids to move from, station to station, if you're doing that, or how are we going to store these devices? So a couple of things that she talked about that I really liked were something called the 1, 2, 3 method, which I'm secondary. And this sounds elementary, but I still think it could work. What you do is you say to kids, okay, 1, I want you to finish your work. 2, I want you to clean up, pick up your papers. And then 3, you need to push in your chair and move. So that's a great idea for digital management. Another thing she talked about is being at a 45-degree angle, like showing kids how they should move the lid of their laptop to 45. So it's not going to shut anything down, but they're not looking at the screen, and they're making eye contact with you for different directions. And then I absolutely love this little chart to the side. Is just a collaborative doc. We've all used those in Google Docs, where kids can actually list that they need help. I love this. It's like a real-time work order, and they can put in, I need help with whatever, and other people in the classroom can support them. So I thought those were really cool ideas. And again, we need to be ready to go back at any time. So moving on, another thing she talks about in the chapter is really thinking about, what is your ideal classroom environment? What would be really helpful, in your room? So if you could just have anything, if you could have your classroom laid out in any way, what would you do? So I'm going to let you just think for 2 seconds about what would you like in your ideal classroom.
Michelle, I love this slide, by the way. This is one of my favorites. One of my favorites. I think about what we have to do with our kids, and when we have them in any kind of workshop, this is vital for this kind of setup, especially with the transition part, especially with that part, and having like little student experts to kind of help you with tech support. So you're not the only one trying to get to a kid who's like, oh, I can't do it. You have help in the room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so moving ahead. So hopefully you've thought about that ideal classroom environment. And now we are going to look at some ideas. So we're going to look at what Michelle Eaton recommends for an ideal classroom environment. So she is going to be talking about and this is on slide 5, she's going to be talking about a quiet, independent space, having a small group space where kids can work together, and then a demonstration space And then finally, a makerspace. So Nicole, if I think about high school, I'm less likely to see all these spaces because we have big kids in small spaces and lots of them. But do you think you work in an elementary school? Is this feasible to have all these spaces?
It's not only feasible, it's vital, but I would say really at any level. And you're right, at high school level, there's not much room. But believe it or not, you might not know this. I've actually been K through 12 at this point. I've been middle school and high school as well. In middle school, it was important for me to have these kind of spaces. And in high school, I didn't have as much room, but I moved the tables, I changed my flexible seating. I was one of those that did that kind of early on. And it made a difference for how my kids learned. So
that's awesome. Okay. So that was really it for chapter 5. Those were the big things, thinking about how to have that device management plan, and then also thinking about your space and making a flow for everyone to move. And again, some of the highlights from that section were really thinking about, using strategies like that 1, 2, 3, or turning that lid at 45 degrees. And then I forgot to mention one of my very favorites, classroom screen. Do you use that one, Nicole?
I use it now because of you. I use it now because of you. I love it, by the way. Thank you for that tip.
We actually use that in our adult meetings where we go into flight mode, like we're on an airplane. So we go to flight mode. We put our screens about halfway down. And back in middle school, when I was with the Verizon school, we had iPads. We do screens down, screens up for the classes. So yeah, definitely good things to know.
Yeah.
Well, since we've taken a break for just a second, Jim, should I be sharing another way so we can see Michelle while she's talking? Because I feel like that's vital for everyone to be able to see her while we're talking.
No, I can occasionally switch back and forth, but
Okay,
we really
great.
like having the slides up and people being able to see those.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you.
All good. And, so that's one of the other things. And then two, Classroom Screen is just that simple website where you can go and get that clock. And I don't know about you guys, but I've used that in professional learning sessions with adults. So they know like, hey, we're going to start in 5 minutes, here's the attendance sheet, whatever is up there for them. So that's been really helpful. All right. So chapter 6, I'm going to jump into. This one was really just about digital versus print reading. And this one is going to serve us very well as we work in remote environments or as we think about going back in person, because it is really important that we think about how we read digitally versus how we read when we're in print. So thinking about it, when you get a book, Nicole, what do you feel like when you get a book that you're excited to read about?
I am definitely one of those people. I love to touch my book, smell my book, feel it. I like to write in it. I like to highlight. I like to dog ear it. So I'm definitely one of those people that I am team print. But I also think for me, learning wise, it's important for me to be able to see it differently than on the screen. I think digital is best for me, like when I have to skim and scan or when I just have to access information really quickly. But if I have to really, really, truly learn, it has to be in print.
Yeah.
So Nicole, you're the first person I've ever heard that talked about smelling the book. That I too have to take inventory of the scent. So I feel like that must be a sign of giftedness.
Okay, well, I'll take that. I appreciate that, Dr. Isaacs. Yeah, that means we're on a good team. We're on a good team.
So, Dr. Isaacs, what do you think? How long do you think, if you go to a computer to Google something, how long do you think you spend on a website? What's the average time that a person spends on a website?
I'm thinking maybe less than 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It just depends on the content. Sometimes I'll hover, but usually I'm looking for instant gratification on the search.
So the answer is that actually 55% of us spend less than 15 seconds on a web page. So we're already primed, you all, as when we're digitally reading, we naturally, just what Nicole said, we naturally just skim. We're not looking for, that comfortable experience where we can find the most comfortable chair. We smell the book, feel the pages. We're just sitting down, skimming, and we're in and out for that information. So what's really interesting is that when we have made this transition from, in person to remote instruction, we've just given kids digital text, but I don't think that we have really prepped them for it. So Dr. Isaacs, are you team print or team digital?
Wow. I'm sitting here surrounded by books. I really do prefer the print, just the tactile experience I think is important. It's part of my learning style, visual first and probably the kinesthetic second. But the digital is also appeals to my sense of I want something right now. So I don't know how to answer that question because they both have a purpose, but it just depends on the need. I don't know what the right answer is. But I do like both. I have an appreciation for both approaches.
I think that's true. So Nicole's going to click and I'll show you the cases. I'm going to actually show you where it would be better to do that. So where it says they are different, we're going to look at print and digital and just talk about how those are different. So with print, as you're reading print, you're much better at finding spatial information. And you've probably had this experience. If you're reading a book in print, you can remember if that was at the beginning of the book, at the end of the book. And a lot of that had to do with you touching those pages and seeing where you were. You can't really do that on a Kindle or a Nook, right? Print also offers fewer distractions. You don't have pop-up ads. You don't have hyperlinks. And really, print is recommended for fiction. There's something about being able to remember that order of the story that really supports reading fiction. And then digital, people who read digital text actually do a little bit better with informational text. So one of the things with a digital text is you can embed hyperlinks, you can have charts, tables, you can have additional information so that it's just not a flat page, right? And so informational reading is actually better. So on the next slide, this is an infographic that Dr. Arena McGrath and I made, and you all have access to this and you can click, but we have some strategies here that you can use to teach your students how to be digital readers. Because again, I don't think that we have taught kids how to be digital readers. And so one of the biggest suggestions, and this is on the next slide where it says Michelle Eaton recommends, is teaching those explicit strategies for each text, and showing kids to take notes while they're reading digitally, and then mix digital and print when you're in class. But when kids are at home, they can grab a piece of paper and they can jot stuff down, and then really teaching kids that they have to code switch between online and in-print reading. And then as a teacher, when you're creating content for kids, remember, you need to highlight essential vocabulary. You need to front load sentences by writing the really important stuff at the beginning. Use a lot of frequent headings. Think about things you find in social media, the top 7 things. You see lots of subheadings, do that. And then make bulleted lists. Because if we know kids skim online, we want to create scannable text that they could just, scan through. And so on the next slide, I offer links to 2 strategies that I really like to use with English learners, but really any students. And it's a way to mix paper with digital text. One is sketchnoting, where kids draw as you read to them or they read. And then another is a one-pager. And if you've ever done a one-pager, they're great. And it's a perfect assignment to do with students because they mixed text and images. But it's also one of the top things I see teachers leave for students when they have a substitute. So that's it. That's the difference between print and digital reading. And I'm going to let Nicole talk about digital content design.
Just a note on what you just shared. So when we think of things that really have that bang for your buck, note making is one of them. It's a high yield instructional strategy. I know sometimes we hate to hear all these terms because they always come at us, but this is one of those that is vital for our kids to really be able to digest and take in the information. And sketchnoting and one-pagers are the top notch of those. So I love that you shared those in particularly. Yeah. Okay. So with chapter 7 and 8, it really is all about digital content design. And we got a crash course in that once we did NTI. I know that some teachers were doing it already, but a lot weren't. And so we got that crash course in trying to figure out how to create our content. What's the best way to present it? What's the best way to get it to kids? What's the best way to get the their assignments back and give feedback. We've gotten a big crash course in that. So that's why this book is perfect. And in particular, chapter 7 and 8, if you are wanting to know the things that you could do different as we create more content. So one of the main things is really just setting up your learning objectives and having hooks. So that's why you see the line where it says your mission, if you choose to accept it. Having those kind of hooks and those learning objectives have kids immediately look at your content. And then just so you know, chapter 7 and 8 is dealing with kind of looking at the software versus teacher created digital content, your design theme choices, and then lesson design, what the differences have to be if it's virtual versus face-to-face. With chapter 8, it talks about that cognitive load, making sure that you're not covering too much information where it can't be able to actually be digested and understood by kids. And then the best ways to design with multimedia content. Especially just making sure that we look at short-term memory, going from short-term memory and working memory to long-term memory so kids are able to retain what we share with them. So when we look at digital content design options, we know the great stuff that we get. We have lots of things that we're already using with Google Classroom, with I think of all the things that we're using as far as, Lexia or Dreambox or those kinds of things. There are pros and cons to that, in the fact of there's maybe not as much flexibility, but it's very professional. There's no prep. There's not much that's on our end that we have to do, but it is cost heavy, very cost heavy, and there's not much flexibility. With teacher created, it's on us. Like we get to, really truly customize it for the kids, make it where it's where they understand and it's what's needed for every one of our kids in our classroom. But we might be limited by our own abilities. I know that I am when I first started to create content. So the best option is really best of both worlds with a hybrid. So that is something to keep in mind when you look at your content design and the best ways to actually leverage what we're already sharing. I mean, JCPS has done such a great job in, getting content for us, getting licenses, getting different programs for us, that it's easy for us to use with our kids. But how do we utilize those options, but also create content that is either a supplement or an addition to, or helps us be able to use that information better? So when you look at designing digital content, the best thing to do is think about what you're trying to do. What's your end goal? What are you trying to do at the end? But most importantly, once they use it, no matter the grade level, how easy are they able to get through everything with digital navigation? So it needs to be clear and concise. It needs to be very easy to use. Think about your use of color. Try to use no more than 3, but keep in mind, if it is something that they're going to have to read for a little bit of time, let's say 5 minutes, really true sustained reading, it should always be a white background with black ink. You will have some students that may have vision issues where you have to do the exact opposite. You actually have to have a dark background with white ink. But for the most part, if it's instructional content, it should be a white background with black ink. I say that because I know me, as you can see with our slides, we want to, kind of just have it very lively and, pictures and graphics and different colors and different fonts. But really, that's not what's best for our kids. So it doesn't mean you have to be boring, but it does mean you need to kind of like keep that in mind as far as what they're looking at on certain slides or digital content that you're creating. Speaking to that, it's also for the same for font selection, making sure that it's no more than 2 fonts. And what's usually best for web is sans serif, or actually sans serif. I've pronounced it incorrectly. The biggest thing in all of this, and this is really whether you're face-to-face or whether you're virtual, is really thinking about all the different ways kids can show what they know and being able to give them feedback and them learning from that and knowing what to do next. So there's something that we need to just embrace. It's very hard to embrace, but we need to embrace it, and that's gradual release. So making sure that your formative assessment strategies are involving self-reflection, those quick activities where students actually think about their thinking. So they understand what they learn, so they can take in what it is and what they need to do next. They have an opportunity to ask questions. They have opportunity to share what they don't understand. You just have to make sure that is part of your lesson design. Try to involve some kind of student interaction where there's peer feedback, peer assessment. I can think of, if you use something like Padlet, kids can be able to address each other through comments or through something they said, or, like something. The chat, when we do polls, something like that, all of that involves like kind of peer feedback and peer assessment, and it makes the learning very social. Other aspects to think about making sure you include in your design is automated assessment. And this is where like the games like Kahoot and those kinds of things come in, also simulations. But the biggest thing is it builds student agency where they can kind of own their learning. And the main thing is that it gives you a brain break. And so it reduces stress. I also think about just when you are looking at student learning, in what ways can you break the mold of what we consider traditional assessment? Does it have to be multiple choice? Does it always have to be a short answer? Just making sure that we are really, really, really looking at all those different ways that kids can show what they know and not always be paper and pencil. So just make sure you put a digital spin on it in some form or manner. And so with Gradual Release, we were designing lessons. So it's an opportunity for a kid to basically show what they know and kind of give understanding before you get to that summative assessment. So that is basically chapter 7 in a nutshell. When you get to chapter 8, the biggest aspect of it is really concentrating on cognitive load. And what we mean by that is that in anything, we can only take in so much information. And so you really want to make sure that you only have the essential information in there. So select only the essential information that kids need to know. Do not put any more than that. Make sure that you are also chunking it. When you have stuff on a slide, such as this, you see I have negative space so that everything's not just, clumped together. So negative space is actually a good thing. And make sure that you have a reflection throughout your lesson. And we kind of when we talk about formative strategies, but we really want kids to be able to have those opportunities to reflect on their thinking, reflect on their learning, reflect on the feedback you just shared with them. So you can do that through quick writes, one sentence summaries, anything like that. And so some teacher-approved digital tools. So when you do get to this presentation, we wanted y'all to have those tools right there. Some you may know, some you may not. I know some that I learned was about Color Hunt Co. It kind of lets you, when you are setting up actually, who I learned from was Michelle Shorey. So actually, I'll let her explain what Color Hunt Co. is.
Color Hunt, you're sweet. Color Hunt Co. is super easy. It's just decorators put together colors that go well together, because I don't have an eye for that. I need to have somebody guide me, what shade blue looks great with what shade pink. And then that text giraffe is fun, Nicole, too, because that you can type in a word and it'll just make a really pretty logo for you. So if you're making something pretty, in your Google Classroom or whatever, you can use it. One that you didn't mention that I'm obsessed with now is that WebAIM website.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And that's where you can go to check your text and your color contrast to make sure that it's going to help students who might have visual impairments. And so that's a really cool thing. You can check your accessibility there at WebAIM. And I'd never heard about that before this book. So that one's really cool to me.
Thank you. That is a good one. And you're right, I didn't put on there. And that is an important one to have, because as I continue to say, what's good for our ELL babies, what's good for our ECE babies, what's good for 504, whatever the case is, if you consider them a special population, is actually really good for all of our kids. So thank you.
I'm coming in here. Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
No, I was just going to share, when they get to this, there's just some activities and action plans that might help from when we do go further into any kind of virtual learning. And just wanted to mention that a lot of this is actually coming from the ISTE standards for educators. So I don't think everyone knows about those, but it is really something to check out. And so I put the hyperlink in there as well. Go ahead, Dr. Isaacs.
I just wanted to jump in to give a shout out to you, Nicole, and you, Michelle. This is, as I'm sure you agree, whatever we bring to the book study, it goes much deeper with what we walk away from. So I just encourage those of you out here that catch this recording by accident or on purpose to be thinking about areas in your building that you want to pursue as a problem of practice to improve upon, and reach out to these people that you see in here, and also to the IT3 team. They are absolutely instrumental in so much of the work behind the scenes, and never take credit for it. we just want to say thank you and keep learning. That's the only way that we improve student learning, is if we shift our own practices. So be hungry for learning. The other thing I want to shout out to Michelle and Nicole are just examples of people that are working so hard behind the scenes, and then instead of taking the evening off, they spend a Monday or a Wednesday evening for an hour, and I'm talking late bedtime, talking about more learning and book study. So we appreciate your leadership, and also for just putting yourself out there today to share. And thank you, IT3. We appreciate you.